Hi internet friends. I feel like it's been an eternity since I did a video strictly about vintage fashion. I have been collecting and selling vintage for over a decade now. Although now I am a lot greedier when it comes to keeping the fashion for myself. I don't sell as much vintage as I used to. Today I wanted to talk about all of the vintage essentials that every wardrobe needs. My vintage collection started out of necessity more than anything. I started working at Nordstrom in my early 20s in Los Angeles, and I was broke. I didn't have any money to spend on clothes. I was working with a crowd of people who were mostly in fashion school, and I just couldn't match their energy. I discovered thrifting because there was a Goodwill right around the corner from the store that I worked at. It became such an essential part of my wardrobe, and I noticed more and more people were stopping me while I was out and about, asking me where I got my clothes. That feeling of saying that it was vintage just took over my life. It became something that was so important to my identity and how I valued and cherished clothing. So in today's video, I want to cover one, what I look for and why I look for these pieces. Two, why I think they are essential, and how to invest in pieces that are timeless and not necessarily going to go out of style. Okay, keep in mind, I know we're in the middle of spring right now and going into summer, so some of these pieces are going to be pieces that maybe don't feel relevant in the moment, but trust me, they always come back around. Okay, first off, I want to start out with blazers, and more specifically and importantly, long line blazers. This makes such a difference in my wardrobe, and take it from someone who understands the price of actual quality goods these days. You can get them for a fraction of the price at the thrift store if you know and understand what you're looking for. With blazers and duster jackets, I always look for something that is a wool blend or 100% wool preferably. I always like to take a look at the lining and make sure that everything is intact, because a lot of times you find the inside lining is ripped. And most importantly, I always look for nibble marks and make sure that there is no wear and tear. Again, these are pieces that you can so easily find at the thrift store. I highly recommend going into the men's section. I think you can have a lot of fun over there. But don't forget, women's career wear in the 1980s and the 1990s is where most of these quality pieces are going to come from. I've already done a video on how to identify vintage. It's a little old now at this point. I think it's over 5 years old, so have that in mind. You will get pixie hair version of me. One thing I will mention is taking a look at tags. That is going to be your best friend, is learning vintage tags and kind of learning what era or what decade they came from. I want to show you a modern day tag versus a vintage tag. This is a Uniqlo tag, very classic, very minimal, and then you have a vintage tag that always has a little bit more detail going on. There's always a little bit more intricacy when it comes to the tag. Tags, I feel like these days are a lot cleaner looking, but they have lacked character in the long term. Next, I want to talk about my favorite category, vintage dresses. This is what really started my love and devotion for vintage clothing. My favorite category of dresses to find would definitely be the boho. I love anything that reminds me of like early to mid 2000s Chloe. Give me all the boho vibes when it comes to dresses. I always look for anything that is cotton gauze. And one way that's really good to identify cotton gauze is looking at the tag. Again, it's that stitched on print, and anything that says it's made in India or imported, that's a holy grail item right there. And it's something that will stand the test of time in your wardrobe. Don't even get me started on how good of quality these pieces are, but also how breathable they are. I also have to say, I feel like the more you wash cotton gauze and wear it, the more character and patina it takes on. Trust me, if you've watched my channel long enough, you know how much I love the word patina. I think cotton gauze is probably the easiest thing to identify when you're out shopping. Whether you're in a vintage store or you're at a thrift store, you can scan the aisles and instantly tell that it is something gauzy. And it's all because of the texture of the fabric. I love a good fancy party dress that I can dress down. Oddly enough, this one was found at the bins. I don't know why, but I would say the pay by the pound stores are the best places to find vintage dresses like this. One of my favorite things about finding vintage 80s dresses is there was a big movement in the 1980s that took from 1930s fashion. A lot of times when you're doing Google searches, you can type in 80s does the 30s, and you can find some amazing pieces that feel like they're 1930s reproduction pieces, but they also have the quality that came from the 1980s. If you buy reproduction pieces now, a lot of times they'll feel a little bit more like a costume piece. When you're shopping from the 1980s era, you can still find those really good, rich quality pieces. Okay, but just for funsies, I have to share these two pieces because they are my most coveted pieces in my wardrobe, so much to the point that I really don't wear them because I'm terrified to ruin them. This is a 1920s, maybe early 30s silk maxi dress. I found this again at the Goodwill bins, pay by the pound store. One of my favorite parts about this dress, just to showcase how old it is it literally was handwritten in the inseam that it is a silk fabric. Very rarely does this see the light of day because I truly don't want anything to happen to this dress. And then next is this probably late 30s, early 40s dress. This is just a stunning piece. Old Hollywood glamour. We'll never say no to a piece like this. Next, let's talk about denim. Denim is a hard one. I'm not gonna tell you that that is very easy to find because it's just not. A lot of the really good denim has been scooped up already, so I would highly recommend shopping online if you truly want a good pair of denim jeans. But if you do come across a really good pair of vintage Levi's, take a look at the tag. If it has like a very paper feel, if it's made in the USA, most likely you've come across a really good pair of 80s or 90s denim jeans. But with that being said, just remember, if you come across some really good denim and it doesn't fit you, get that bad boy tailored, okay? Keep that in your wardrobe because if you can get that to fit you, it is going to be a staple piece. It is going to be the icon of your wardrobe. I have sold too much good denim over the years and it has broken my heart every single time I've passed it along. Just knowing that if I had kept it and held on to it, it would probably be some of my best fitting denim that I own. Okay, let's talk about handbags next. This piece will always be so important to me. My mother gave this to me and it is just one of those like classic vintage Dooney and Burke bags that will forever be on trend because it is good quality, it's a good color. Again, the vintage patina always counts on pieces like this. The more it wears, the better it's gonna look. This is a vintage Donald Pliner handbag that I have had since I lived in Las Vegas, and it was probably one of my favorite purchases from that time period. One of the best parts about buying vintage for handbags is, again, the quality of leather. You're always going to find a good quality piece, the integrity is going to be built into it, and oh my gosh, the uniqueness. How can you pass up on a piece like this? Like, it is so unique. Okay, next, let's talk about trouser pants. Trouser pants are my personal favorite because I am rocking some right now. I would have to say for me, vintage trouser pants are right there with dresses. It was what got me started in this career. I really needed something that was dressed up, and vintage was readily available at the thrift store at the time. I really like the high-waisted cut, and vintage trouser pants always offered that. And not to mention, again, this is something that you will always find good quality pieces when you go the vintage route. Look for herringbone, look for plaid print, look for camel tone wool. Those are some of the best pieces that you can put into your wardrobe. It is so much so what is on trend right now as far as like old money, quiet luxury, all that nonsense. You can find that at the thrift store and not pay a fortune for these pieces. One of my personal favorite pieces that I've had for years now, I talked about this a couple videos back, so I feel like I'm talking about them at length. Albums by Kenzo. I love this brand. Anything old or new Kenzo, I will always pick up at the thrift store. But you give me those like 1980s kind of drop waist pants. These are so good. Take a look at this photo of Julia Roberts from the early 90s and tell me this is not something that she was rocking at that time. Other pieces that have kind of come and gone from my wardrobe, but I would always say is something good to add in: camo pants and military pants. I love anything from the men's section or the little boys section, just like some rugged, high-waisted, kind of worn-in military pants. Anything surplus, but it has to be worn in. Again, with that patina, that's what matters. That's what matters when you're looking at vintage pieces like this. It's already been broken in, you know, it already has that wear to it. Let's talk briefly about decades. Now, I would say 70s, 80s, and 90s are going to be the three decades that you can obviously find really easily. You go back any further, 60s, 50s, 40s, they're getting a lot harder to come by. I'm not gonna lie. Before the like vintage boom happened, you could probably walk into any thrift store and find a lot of these pieces. That time period has unfortunately come and gone. It is what it is. With each decade that passes, you also have to look at it realistically. You know, if some of these pieces are 100 years old, it's probably gonna be a little bit harder to find them. So with that being said, 70s, 80s, and 90s, 70s, my personal favorite pieces to come across is anything with a pointed collar. This is something that I feel like never goes out of style, but you can always find these at the thrift store knowing to look for the pointed collar. I love jumpsuits from the 1980s. I am such a sucker for these pieces. This one in particular I love because it fits into that minimal aesthetic. And also just a note, a lot of times it does become a little difficult to identify the late 80s or in the early 90s. So some of these could be crossovers, but this is the classic label ABS. Another personal favorite label of mine is Casual Corner or Campus Casuals. And also, don't forget Express. That is a vintage label. Most people forget that and think that it is only contemporary line, but no, you can find some really good 1980s, early 90s Express. My absolute favorite thing from the 1990s that is not often spoken about is matching sets. I think sets were a little bit more popular for career wear in the 80s, but then in the 90s, it was like it exploded and you had so many like matching pieces. I absolutely love this one. It's from Moda International. This is another really good brand to look out for, Moda International. Also, not to mention, suiting is so big right now, and trust me, there are some good vintage suits out there from the 80s and 90s that will look fantastic in this current modern day trend. This right here in the stores, modern day, would be like $200 to $300 minimum, okay? 100% silk, come on, think about that quality. Thrifted is always better, okay? I totally forgot to mention cardigans. This is gonna be a last minute addition, but cardigans are my absolute favorite. I think I wasn't thinking about it because it's so hot right now while I'm filming. 70s and 80s vintage cardigans, 1980s side effects cardigans. Don't even get me started. That was like a theme on my channel for the longest time, as I would walk into a thrift store and see how many side effects cardigans I could find. But there is something so good about a nubby knit oversized cardigan, and the shape on them, that is almost something that you could argue was 80s does 30s, because 30s they had the like puffiness, puffy. Like it was, you know, had the little like rouge at the top. I talk about this a lot. Marilyn Monroe cardigan, the dude cardigan, those are always classic pieces to find at the thrift store, and I always get super excited when I do find them. I really hope that this video helps train your eye in what to look for, and also understand how much uniqueness and character vintage can bring into your wardrobe. I think one of the biggest reasons that I love and will always gravitate towards vintage is one, the quality, but two, it just sets you apart. It really commands a presence. I think when you really nail styling and aesthetic and find your own personal style, you'll realize how much taking clothing from any decade and figuring out ways to style it, it just really sets the tone for who you are as an individual. Learning and knowing about quality, make, cut, design, all of those things will make you appreciate and respond that much more to vintage fashion and realize how valuable it can be in your wardrobe. Identifying vintage though is definitely a video I recommend watching if you want to laugh at my early stages of YouTube. I think it still holds true to this day though, as far as how to identify pieces. That is it for today's video. I hope this maybe give you some inspiration to head out to the thrift store and find some really cool vintage pieces, because trust me, they are still valuable. And even though we are currently in a minimalist, like very modern trend era, you can still incorporate these pieces into your wardrobe and feel like $1,000,000. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys are new around here, I might have a couple extra videos for you right here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.